Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Morning Sam, Morning Ralph. This is, of course, the podcast for restaurant technology professionals. And I've got a really cool guest today who's joining us from across the pond. His name is Richard Liverman. And if you've seen him on LinkedIn or perhaps you've worked with him in the past, you know that A, he's a really bright guy, and B, he's never boring because
No pressure. No pressure there.
no pressure, Richard. So, Richard, welcome to the show. No pressure, man. Come on.
No pressure. Well, I know the show's good morning, but where I am, it's good evening just because I'm 5 hours ahead. But we'll skip over that.
Well, I hope that, but you are drinking tea, right?
I've got a cup of tea on the go, and I've also got a pint of squash, not beer.
Squash.
And squash, just for our North American friends, it's a cordial that you add water to. So this is blackcurrant and apple.
Morning, Ralph. Morning, Sam.
Oh my God, I love it. Well, I got to tell you, this is going to be a learning experience for me. I'm just a country bumpkin from out here in Boston. We're a simple folk. All we do is basically freeze to death. But here we are. It's nice and warm. It's toasty. And we're going to learn a little bit today about the impact of business mentoring on organizational success and personal development. This is where we're going to go. Richard, why does somebody hire a business coach?
Do you know what it is? There's lots of different reasons. I don't think there is one answer to that. But I do think there are some things that you can tie together because everybody's different individually. But I always think to myself, there's a very simple attitude. You start here and you finish here. And I think there's that little bit where, you know, we've all had those people that have lifted us, whether it be a teacher, whether it be family, whether it be friends. And you look at, and I always think there's lots you can learn from professional sports or professional singers or people at their very best. So I love watching sports, although some of my teams that I follow is a little questionable. However, what's really amazing is when you see coaches get the best out of individuals. And I think there's that little bit, how can you be the very best version of yourself? Or how can your business be the best version of yourself? And thinking that you can do it all by yourself. What's really interesting, when I went through my training, the tutor put on the wall a slide and it had Barack Obama, LeBron James, Oprah Winfrey. And they said, what do these people all have in common? I went, they're American. I went, that's not the answer, Rich.
Yeah.
So they all have coaches. And I went, yeah, but they're all really successful. And I went, and that's the point. And I think there was something for me in that moment that the penny dropped.
It's true, though. It's so true. It's like the best people in the world at what they do.
Yeah.
They've had a mentor. They've learned this from somewhere. And it could have been as, simple as their upbringing, and that was certainly probably foundational. But as they go and progress in their careers, and whether that be in sports or in business, you're always learning. And, at least you should be.
I think if you're not, you're kind of standing still. And there was, I was working with a client this morning and they said, well, you need to diversify or you end up dying. I think there's this little bit, how can you get that continuous learning? Or as our Japanese friends say, that continuous improvement. Now, I have mentors in my life, both professional and personal, but I also have that ability to work with coaches to make sure that I'm the best version of myself. And I think there's that little bit where often there's this image that people, take a LeBron James, for instance, oh yeah, he's like really talented. He's really good at what he does. Well, yes, he is. He should never have left Cleveland. We'll skip over that. But
agreed, by the way.
What took him from good to great? And yes, you've got to have that internal drive. And yes, you've got to have that natural skill and ability. But who are the people that help you craft what you do? And for me, what's amazing about coaching and mentoring is finding those people that are open to being better, because that's almost like where the magic happens. You have to be ready for it.
That's definitely right. Yeah, agreed. You've probably read the book, the EOS book, Traction, right? And it's all about accountability, right? Accountability is a huge part of, I think, growth. Being accountable for your actions, being accountable for goal setting, etc. But part of that is also being able to open. You mentioned it, being open. And this concept of letting go of the vine.
Yeah. And if you think about it another way, we do not know everything. Like we don't. And I think there's that little bit where who are those people, who are those experts that you can go to become stronger, better, fitter, healthier? And it's almost acknowledging that we don't know everything. And I think there is this kind of perception that, some social media has created where, you have to put out this image that you're absolutely perfect, that you're absolutely successful at everything you do. Well, it's not true.
Yeah.
It's not true. It's a lot of work. And I think that openness to grow and develop is something that when you've got that will lead you towards that success that,
I couldn't agree with you more. And to be, perfectly transparent, one of the reasons why I kind of gravitated to doing a podcast is because I'm not an expert in everything. I want to talk to people that are smarter than me, particularly in certain areas. Listen, I kind of know my lanes. I know what I'm pretty good at, right? But I want to talk to people that can help me expand my knowledge. I want to, to improve, because it's the same thing. I tell my kids, if you're not learning, then what the hell are you doing? You need to be open.
Absolutely. There's a really nice quote from Richard Branson, who is the owner of Virgin Atlantic, amongst many other brands. And he said, I never want to be the smartest person in the room because it means I've hired idiots. And I think there's that little bit where, how can you surround yourself with people that make you stronger and better? Right. And I think it's a challenge to everybody listening. Who are those people that lift you, inspire you, educate you? Who do you learn from? And I'm really lucky. I've got some great people in my life. And I also, I'm listening. I'm also reading books, listening to books, and
Richard, how
hanging
did you
out
get
with
into
people who make
this,
me
though?
stronger.
I mean, what was the impetus? You spoke about it a little bit. You had this thing that triggered in your mind, like, okay, here's some really successful people, but they were all coached. But what led you down this path towards coaching and mentorship?
Do you know what? I'd had a career working on. I worked on a really big retailer in the UK in the marketing team. I'd launched gift cards in the UK for an American organization. I worked for a design agency on incredible global brands that had took me all over the world, working on some mega names, ran a business. And whilst I was running a business, it was interesting at the time. And a friend of mine invited me on a coaching and mentoring course. I was like, that's a bit curious. I thought, yeah, I'll give this a go. I had a few people in my team. I thought, I can lift them up. And it was one of those moments. It was, I don't want to go the whole dead poets route, but it was not dissimilar to standing on the table and going, yes, captain, my captain. There was an amazing guy there called Graham Ravenscroft, who...
Great name. Great name.
Do you know is really interesting about Graham? Many things. And if he listens to this, he'll be dead embarrassed. He was one of the British Olympic team coaches. And he also worked as a business coach and doing training. And he taught the high jump. And he'd had a few gold medal winners. I mean, thank goodness he wasn't teaching me the high jump, because that would have been painful for the pair of us. But what was really interesting was he was talking about coaching and mentoring. And he was the guy that put the image of all those successful Americans up on the board. But what was amazing about it is, whilst working with him on that course, I found my ikigai. I found that kind of purpose that I've been looking for. I found something that I loved. I found something I was curious about. I found something that I was good at. And this guy set it off in my head. And he said, you should do this full time. COVID happened. And I was like, do you know what? This is my time. This is my time.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need those people in your life. You don't know where they're going to come from, and then they get in your head and they do something brilliant. And
Absolutely.
for Graham, I'll always be grateful.
I think so much of that is is just being able to recognize the opportunity too, right?
Yeah.
That opportunity recognition and opening yourself up and saying yes and following your heart in that way.
Yeah. And I say to my son all the time, or both my sons, opportunities come up in front of you, but it's up to you to grasp them. And I'm beginning to sound like Eminem in 8 Mile. But the point is that, it's up to you to take those opportunities and go and explore it and see what happens. That was over 4 years ago, and I'm on this amazing adventure. And the amazing adventure is working with great people and doing something I love. I mean, who wouldn't want to do
Well,
that?
exactly right. All right. So let's get into it a little bit, Rabbit. How about tell me? So let's talk about the benefits of what does business mentoring do for someone hires you? What are
Yeah.
some of the benefits that they can expect, for both? Let's think about it from both startups. Well, let's take it from a startup level, because sometimes, like in my business, there are restaurant tech people that have all of these amazing ideas. They're just they have this solution that is incredible.
Yeah.
And maybe even they have a couple of companies that are believers,
Yeah.
but they just can't get it together with their messaging, or they can't get it together with their storytelling and how to present it all. So tell me about how are you helping a startup break out?
Great question. And just as you were asking it, I suddenly thought of Andre Agassi and that brilliant Pepsi Max advert from I think it was 80s or 90s, where been there, done that, got the t-shirt. And I'm almost the person that I'm not Andre Agassi, that's for sure, but the got the t-shirt bit. And I think there's that little bit where when you've got that little bit of experience that you can guide people, and there's a Star Wars reference in there. He says with a lightsaber behind him. That if you think about Luke Skywalker, for instance, in the first good Star Wars film, Luke Skywalker's on his planet. His uncle and aunt have sort of been viciously murdered by the Empire.
Mm.
And Luke goes on this adventure. Well, if you think about a startups are on this massive adventure.
Yep.
How does Luke learn the way of the Force? He meets Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I think there's that little bit where I'm not comparing myself to a Jedi. I can't do any tricks. But the point of it is, a mentor is there to guide somebody, to make them stronger, to help them with that little bit of knowledge that they might have, or that little bit of experience. They're there to introduce them to other people. They're there to support them, to listen, to challenge. And if you think about the story, Luke wouldn't have got to where he got to if it hadn't have been for his mentors. And he had more than one.
That's right. And I love that. That's a beautiful analogy. And as a matter of fact, that's something that I agree so wholeheartedly with. And I can even put that same mentoring wrapper around B2B. Like if you're
Yeah.
a business to business company, you're not the hero.
No.
You're not the hero. Your
And
customer is the hero.
I had the same conversation
Right.
with one of my clients last Friday. And what was really interesting about it is it took them a couple of minutes to get away from the fact that they were the hero. And don't get me wrong, I said to them, the work you do is heroic. They're an incredible organization. The work they do is heroic. The reason why their work is heroic is not just the values of the organization, but because they make their clients stronger and better. And I think there's this little bit where I live by a mantra of don't be boring. I think so often businesses, especially B2B, go, we're the hero. We're going to change your world. And you think about those, we're allowed to swear.
You can do whatever the fuck you want.
Oh, good. Just checking. You know those really shit sales calls you get where they're like, hey, we can change your life. Da, 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 da. And you're there, you're like, just go away. But what's really interesting is, what about those people that, you follow online or you learn about and you hear their stories about how they make other people stronger and better?
That's right. And what's the thing about the mentor? And we can say Obi-Wan Kenobi, we can say Morpheus.
Yeah.
We can say, there's like 1,000,001 different mentors that appear in some of the best movies and stories. And the reason for that, or what the mentor gives, there's always the magic gift that the mentor gives, right? So if you're a B2B company, well, your role as mentor is to lift up your hero, give them the knowledge, but more importantly, give them the special gift, which might be your product, to help them slay the dragon, kill Darth Vader, take the red pill, and kill the, Agent Smith, whatever. The point is that you're the mentor. You're giving this gift
Yeah.
to the hero.
And it's interesting when you mentioned all those stories. The original word mentor comes from Greek mythology.
Tell me.
That's where it comes from.
I didn't know.
And it's always been about stories. And I think what's really interesting when you think about the shit sales calls is because the person who's ringing you thinks that they're the hero and they're being boring.
Yeah.
The stories that we love are when, somebody goes from A to B and they're guided by somebody that helps them on their journey. And a lot of this thinking, there's a book called Story Brand, which describes this more eloquently than myself. But where it's really interesting with that type of thinking is how do we bring that into our businesses? Because the boring ones tell you about, hey, we've got this great product, you should buy from us. Boring.
Right.
How do you make my life easier, simpler, more enjoyable, or better?
And that's kind of when you get into this, the idea of character development, right? So what character are you in this grand story, and how is your character attractive to the hero in some way?
And do you know, for me, when you talk about stories and the bits that I love, there's a mentee that I was working with this morning. I've been working with him for about 1.5 years. And the thing that brings me most joy is seeing them flourish. And there's something great. I mean, you know this from the work that you do. There's nothing better than when a client rings you up and tells you something's going really well.
Right, it's beautiful.
And you see that, it's almost like that nice assist that you get.
That's right. That's
and
right.
You just
Yeah.
think,
It makes
nice feeling.
everything worthwhile. All right, let's switch gears here for a second. I looked up a bunch of your stuff. I did my homework for this podcast too. All right.
Uh-oh.
So, well, one of the things that you like to talk about in your travails is this TIA approach. Thinking, inspiration, and action.
Yeah.
Talk to me. What do you mean by that?
There's lots of different ways of analyzing situations. But for me, you think about, okay, how do you make something better? Whether it be a person, whether it be a business process, whether it be a brand. And for me, you have to do that initial thinking, understand what's going on, and really get under the skin of things. And one of my favorite things to do is, if at all possible, is go and get my client's product or test the service without them knowing. You start the thinking straight away. The inspiration is the ideation. And that's sort of one of the fun bits of what I do. So you've done the thinking, you've analysed the problem, you understand the situation, you go, right, what do we need to do to make this person stronger, more directional, whatever word you want to choose. And that's where the inspiration and the ideas come from. There's that creativity.
Yeah.
And people mistake creativity for the ability to draw. Creativity is the ability to solve a problem.
Yeah.
And
that's right. Yeah.
It's such a beautiful word, but the creativity is the inspiration bit. But it's all very well having thinking, it's all very well having inspiration, but without action, nothing happens. So it's about actually creating something that is actionable, because otherwise it's just great ideas. Well, so what?
So how do you recommend then? What's the blueprint for something like that? How do you structure that so that's like a working framework for for actually making something happen? Thinking, inspiration, and action. Are we writing all this down? I mean, how does this work?
Do you know what it is? It's more like a mantra and a way of life.
Okay.
So it just becomes ingrained into how you work. So for some clients, it could be a keynote. For other clients, it could be as simple as I was working with a client this morning. They're going to be delivering a presentation. Around it was, okay, how can we make this more interesting and more relatable. The inspiration could be, well, we'll go and have a look at some TED Talks. And the action is like, so there's many different ways of delivering it, but it almost becomes like a mantra in the same way that, if you ask Nike, what do they stand for? Just do it.
Yeah.
It becomes a way of life. How it's delivered can vary, but it goes through everything that, I do, whether it's coaching, mentoring, branding, consultancy.
So that brings up a really interesting point. One of the questions that I had in my mind, and I don't know if these words they're certainly used interchangeably, but is there like a difference between coaching and mentoring? I mean, is that the same thing in your mind, or?
This is one of those ones where I remember doing my essay on this when I went through my training.
Did you?
So I should give a really firm academic answer.
Give it to me. Come on.
But that's
Or
a bit
don't.
boring. That's a bit boring. I scored okay. For me, coaching is one of those things that can be a little bit more short term. Mentoring for me is a much longer term process. So coaching might be helping somebody master a particular skill or get over something. Mentoring is much more sort of guidance. Now, yes, there is going to be a crossover between the two. And I think the words get used interchangeably. But for me, mentoring is more long-term and more guidance, whereas coaching is, teaching somebody a skill, whether it's an Andre Agassi serve, a golf swing, or teaching somebody how to make the perfect pina colada. That could be coaching and training. Whereas mentoring might be taking somebody on a much longer journey.
So I'll give a for instance. In my world, media training might be coaching.
Yes.
Okay.
But actually having somebody that once you've completed that says, right, I've got you back for the next however many years. And what I'm going to do is right, you've done this. Where are you now? How can I introduce you to X, Y, and Z? How can we improve you? And for me, it's much longer process.
Yeah.
But the words are interchangeable.
But if I were to hire you as a mentor or a coach to help me, guide me through let's say I have a speaking engagement coming up.
Yeah.
Would you work with me to fine tune my talking points, my presentation deck, the salient points, act as like role play? How does that work?
Yeah, all of those things, all of the above. And I think for a coach, like I said, at the very start, you start here, you should finish there.
Yeah.
So if you think about, I think one of the most things that people are most scared of is public speaking. I mean, I personally would have gone with heights and snakes, but the number one in the world is fear of public speaking. So coaching might be helping somebody to be able to get on stage and actually just speak. That could be an achievement. It might be working on your music, words, and dance, if you've heard that expression before.
I haven't, no.
Oh, this is a great one. Here's one to share very quickly. So when it comes to communication, the actual words that people say are only worth about 10% of what people hear. What they actually hear is the music, the tone of your voice, the speed that you're talking, those slower pauses. The dance is the body language around it. And if you're listening to this, you're missing my hands that are moving all over the place. Put the three together, that's music, words, and dance. And that's how we communicate. So a coach would be, okay, well, if the music's worth 35% and the dance is worth another 55%, and we know the words are worth 10%, yes, you need to make sure the words are very good, but actually we also need to work on your music and your dance. So that's what I mean by coaching. So it's actually looking at what are those techniques and how can we improve that? Whereas a mentor might go, right, you've done that first speech. Let's have a look at speech 3, 5, 10. Where are you going next with this? So it becomes a much longer process.
Oh,
do you see the differences?
Yeah, I can, absolutely. And I can see how that would be extremely valuable, particularly for leaders that, have a very public role, or there's a lot of demand on them. Perhaps they're in charge of a lot of people.
Well, look at Steve Jobs. If you want to, because I know we talk a lot about tech. Steve Jobs, love him or loathe him, was a techie, an uber geek that invented amazing things. He was one of those people that became a public figure. And when you look at all the Apple launches, when he was on that stage in the black t-shirt, he would have spent hours and hours perfecting his music and dance.
Yeah. And it comes off as such that, he just woke up and did it, which is, I guess, the testament to, to his practice.
Which is a testament to his work. But if you think about it another way, if you think about somebody like Madonna, for instance, this is somebody who's naturally the way that she comes across on stage, the way that she energizes, that kind of music and dance and words to her is probably more natural because she's a natural performer.
All right, so this is a good segue, actually, to this concept of neurodiverse people and entrepreneurs. So what kind of experiences have you had with neurodiverse individuals? And, I would assume that, with neurodiversity comes a whole host or range of strengths and weaknesses that you're dealing with.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to answer this question first by saying that I'm ADHD. And it's one of those things that since I was going to say I've had it all my life, but it was almost like that moment in The Sixth Sense where everything suddenly makes sense. I'm not going to do any spoilers for people that haven't seen that film. But the point of it is, no, careful, no spoilers. What's really interesting is when you understand who you are and when you understand how the neurodiverse community is, you sometimes need to make some adaptations. And what's really interesting, and I really see this as part of the way that I work, and this is based on lived experience, working with my own coach and really getting a grip and understanding of what's going on. There are so many benefits of it. I can do big picture thinking. I'm incredibly creative. I'm good at listening. So I really know my strengths. What's also interesting is, okay, how do I mitigate my weaknesses? How do I work on those things that I might find harder? That could be attention to detail. It could be whatever it is. So I think about how I can help people build scaffolding.
Yeah.
So what's really interesting about neurodiversity, there's many words that are beginning to become mainstream for the wider world. One is scaffolding. I love the idea of scaffolding. How can you build things in your life to make your life easier so you can grow? So a perfect example of scaffolding is I have a tablet where I can write and it turns it into a Word document. That is a bit of scaffolding that I have. Or if I'm on a Zoom call, I can put a bit of AI on that captures the conversation so I can really focus on the person rather than having to make lots and lots of notes. So it's like, okay, how can you build that scaffolding so that you can be the best version of yourself? And for me, it's about helping identify where those neurodiverse individuals need that support so they can be the best version of themselves. So I like to think that I'm part of their scaffolding, but you can also see how that analogy works just as well for coaching and mentoring. It's just, what are those things you need to put in place to help you grow? And I love the terminology because I think it makes a great deal of sense.
Yeah, it does. I love that term. That does make sense. Terrific visual as well. Richard, let's talk about misconceptions about business coaching, right? One of these, this is sort of the part of the show that I like to talk about called Hate to Tell You But. And this is where, I like to bring on, as we mentioned in the beginning of the show, I like to talk to experts that are really good at what they do. And one of the best parts of these conversations that I have with folks is learning kind of what their pet peeves are about the area that they specialize in. So if I were to say, hate to tell you, but business coaching is, help me finish that sentence.
I'm going to do a couple with this. I hate to tell you that there are lots of business coaches out there that are a little bit shit. I hate to tell you there are lots of business coaches with loads of qualifications that are awful. I hate to tell you that there's some business coaches with no qualifications that are fantastic. And for me, I'm going to make this another analogy because we like analogies.
We do.
For me, it's about finding the right one for you. And anybody tells you that they're for everybody, walk away straight away. And there's a little moment in the first Harry Potter film and the first book. And Harry Potter goes in to get his first wand. And he tries all the different wands. And suddenly there's one that's got that natural feel. And he just feels really connected to it. That's what you should be looking for in a business coach or a business mentor or a consultant. What's the one that you feel naturally comfortable with? What's the one that's going to lift you up? What's the one that's going to make you better? Not the one that
But you're
tells
saying
you,
shop
I'm the
around.
greatest coach in the world.
Yeah,
I'm
just
saying you've got
because
to
someone
find what's right.
may have been recommended does not necessarily mean they're for you. You really need to.
Correct.
So along those lines, how do you begin? How do you work with somebody? Is there like a trial period? Is there like a get to know you? It's, do you talk about what your favorite whiskey is? I mean, what is?
Oh, well,
Is it just a
that's very
conversation?
simple.
Yeah, we're
Jack
going to do
Jack
another
Daniel's
podcast
Gold.
called the Whiskey Cast. Yeah,
Oh no, that'd be Jack Daniel's Gold. Beautiful whiskey. They've stopped making it, which is a real shame. It's very simple. I like to have a chemistry session with people. I like to have a chemistry session where we just see if we connect in the same way that Harry was trying all the different ones. What I want to know is, am I right for that person? And is that person right for me? And I think there's been occasions where people have said no, and I've said no. But the ones that say yes, we're going to go on a hell of a ride. Yeah. We're going to go on a journey, and it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of work. There are moments where it's very emotional, and you need to work with somebody that you can trust to make you better. Because it's not just a financial
one of those things, though, Rich. Like being a coach and a mentor is, that is emotional.
Yes.
So how do you keep those boundaries in place? Because you're doing everything, like when you're working with a client, and I know you're the type of guy that you have this super empath. You get your antennas way the hell up there. You're feeling the vibes. You're trying so hard to make this person better, and you just want them to win and succeed. How do you balance all that without driving yourself completely fucking crazy?
Do you know what? I'm really pleased I had some training before I started this. I'm not going to lie. I'm really pleased I had some training before I started this. I'm really pleased that I work with great coaches. This year, I'm absolutely buzzing. I am going to Oxford University to an advanced coaching and mentoring qualification. And it's one of those ones where I have to look after myself. And I think there's this little bit, there's a lovely quote from mindfulness that says, before helping others, put the oxygen mask on yourself. My oxygen mask is working with my coach. My oxygen mask is checking in with my mentor. My oxygen mask is gratitude. My oxygen mask is taking the dog for a walk and watching my sports teams and being with my family. So I think it's one of those ones where you have to have all of that stuff in place before you can help other people. So I have to make sure the oxygen mask is firmly on my face.
Perfect. You know what? Let's leave it there. Let's wrap with this. Tell us how we can get in touch with you. Tell us where we can find you. If you're going anywhere next. Richard Liverman, everybody. Awesome chat. We're going to do this again. But where can we find you next? Where are you?
I'm here, there, and everywhere. But the easiest way to find me is on LinkedIn. If you look for Richard Liverman, you will find I have a big banner that says "Don't be boring" on my LinkedIn profile, which is a challenge to everybody on LinkedIn. You'll find me on Instagram at Richard Solutions Global. You'll find my website, richardsolutions.com. And again, you'll find a massive banner that says "Don't be boring." If you've landed there, you're in the right place. I'd love to have a conversation with you.
Beautiful. We'll put those links in the show description. Richard, man, it's been a pleasure. I'm so glad we did this.
Likewise. Yeah, me too. It's been fun.
All right. Ciao.
Morning, Ralph. Morning, Sam.